Start recording. Start streaming. All right, we should be up on Twitch as well as Discord. So hopefully you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. So just go ahead and react over there to let me know that you can hear and see this. Hopefully. All right, good. A couple. If you want to go to twitch.tv/erasermice, that's also a stream. Both should be 1080p. I am recording the Twitch stream locally, and it will be available for the next 14 days. And that is how that should be. All right, let me switch over to game architecture. No announcements being live. Content. All right. So 2, 4, 6, 7 of you, but I only got 4 thumbs up. What's going on? Let's see. I need some more. Need some more thumbs up here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. You're doing way better percentage-wise than my intro to game programming class. 7, excellent. All right. So if I sound a little bit weary, you can imagine how I'm normally burnt out after intro to game programming. And that was a Twitch stream worse. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I think more. Well, it's a mix of who tuned in to Twitch versus who tuned in to Discord. Either are fine. The big question is really just one of availability. Obviously, the Twitch stream will be available for 14 days plus, and I'm also recording it to put them up on YouTube as necessary, whether they actually warrant it. Try to put stuff up in there that's a little bit more general. But the Twitch stream will be there, and Discord is here for us as well. All right, so you will hear me occasionally making tea drinking sounds during the day to keep myself going. My eyes are dry, my throat is dry, but I'm pretty sure I'm okay here. We've been sequestered, quarantined, whatever. Not quarantined. We know nothing in the house that we know of. Some caveats. Okay, so Troy still exists. We have a light snow. Things are okay. RPI has graciously offered the Amos supercomputer services for any help in getting the COVID research done that needs to get done. So that's news of the day. So we'll have some public service announcements as part of our streams. You've all received the notification, I assume. And here's what I'll do. I'm going to ask questions, and then you can give. If you change your React to something else, I doubt you can. You probably can't have multiple Reacts on the same thing, I don't think. But if you want to change your React to something else, other than thumbs up, to say, if I ask, please react with a, I don't know, what else do we got? Mind blown, or a thinking about it, or laughing, or Google eyes, whatever, or the shit emoji. All right, we'll use that to kind of back and forth. So let's see, Ben, you're a good case here. So did you react with both? Okay, so we can do multiple reacts, I think. All right, we'll work out this. We're pioneering here, and I feel really good about this. Those of you who don't know, in cognitive science, the stuff that I'm interested in is actually multimedia learning theory, and this is a really, really good test environment for that. But practical things first. So you've all gotten word, I assume, about the new pass no credit ruling on all classes this semester, which basically means you have up until May 15th to decide whether or not you want this course to appear potentially as pass no credit on your transcript / graduation documentation whatsoever, whatever, that sort of thing, which basically means that any course you are taking, you can just basically designate as pass no credit, and it will just show up as pass for the semester if you think you're not going to be doing particularly well, or you had any issues. So that's kind of cool for people who weren't doing quite as well. I have fairly, I feel fairly optimistic that based on everybody's progress so far, if you stick with it and you get the assignments done and you do a decent job on final project, whatever that becomes, that you're going to probably want to stick without the pass no fail, but you can decide up until May 15th after classes is over. So that's a good thing. What I'm looking for basically, though, is for people to still stay engaged, to get the work done, to understand things, to ask questions, be involved. There's no excuse for it. I know you're all kind of stuck wherever you are and in for the duration for a while, so we might as well make the best of it. So how the class is going to be run, deadlines are going to become a lot more fluid. Once upon a time, RPI had these classes called self-paced courses, which I hated. But back in the day when I was at RPI, we had these self-paced courses, and based on the number of units that you completed, that would basically determine your grade. So you could say, okay, I'm going to do the bare minimum and wind up with a D, and then check out. Prefer not to resort to that full kind of thing. But, with that experience under my belt, I can honestly say, all right, self-paced in this case might be a good thing, but let's not do self-paced for the goal of, checking out. Instead, I'd like to kind of work with each of you as much as possible, and with us as a group, kind of exchanging ideas back and forth, which is largely what we were doing to begin with. So this is right up our alley. We are gamers after all. We know this online stuff. So I will relax some of the deadlines as well, though. But some of the projects that we're getting into, I don't think they're necessarily that much more difficult than what we've had in the past. Kind of stick with it on the ones where we are now, and let me know when you've got the project done. This is kind of it's going to sound weird, but let me know when you're done, or when you consider it done, or when you want to move on to the next one, and I will review it and we'll go over it together, and we'll have to sort of decide, okay, did you get it done, explain it to me, and so on, so I can assign you a grade that makes sense. Like I said, for the most part, I think we're in pretty good shape, so we'll get through this. As far as the lecture materials go, there's largely, I'm going to put the materials online. This isn't quite the same as my intro to game programming class, where I'm doing lots of Unity demonstrations and so on. So the type of materials that we have, whether it makes sense to really stream every class, we'll decide. We'll kind of play that by ear as well. I'm definitely going to be available during those times, during the what is our normal class times. So I'd want to go with making sure that the material is up and available. I thought I had put both versions. There's an animation part 1, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Kind of go through things. It's kind of really just stepping through and discussing what's in the materials. And if anyone finds any online resources, any kind of good demonstrations and good past game conference notes and so on that they want to share as well, that's all good. We're exploring the world here. So what am I forgetting? So timelines. The final project, that's going to be interesting, of course. I still want everyone to do a final project, but like I said, maybe it winds up being a little bit more open-ended. I can't imagine anyone's going to really kind of gravitate towards trying to do the multi-person group versions of those projects, but I do want to see you go that move forward. So we're going to continue with that. So if you can't make this time, 2, 4, 6, 8. So not quite everybody is here. I haven't heard back from everybody yet, so I don't know exactly what's going on. But if you can't make a class time, go ahead and let me know, just so I know kind of what's going on. So we checked in, see where you're at. But do feel free to watch the Twitch stream, check in, see if it makes sense, skim through it, and so on. It will be available. But as far as interaction goes, the best thing we have going for us, or in our favor, is of course the Discord, since we'll all be there, and the threads are going to hang around, and we can do that. The Discord streams don't persist though. Discord is just streaming, so that's why I'm using Twitch for the lectures. So if you want to watch the lectures on Twitch and not sit here through all the rambling, absolutely fine. That's that. Am I missing anything out? Any questions, background questions? Does that cover it? I have no idea with regards to most RPI administrative issues above and beyond my pay grade in terms of what's going on with other reimbursements and things. But so don't ask that kind of thing. But otherwise, you can always ask me just about anything. How are your other classes going? Also, if you are having any issues, or you notice that there's like some particular class that seems to be struggling with technology, I'm going to imagine, again, for the most part, since you are all mostly, I'm thinking, if not, you should all be computer science duals at this point. So your classes are probably already on top of things. But if you have any concerns or anything, let me know and I'll see what I can do to kind of help things out. All right, nobody's typing anything, so I'm assuming we're just going to go forward. So let's go ahead. Let's try to do this. Now, as this is going on as well, to look, if you want the presentations to look best, unfortunately, for some crazy reason that I haven't been able to find or figure out, there's no way for me to just say, okay, go to this web page and you'll see this Google slide presentation. Somehow, for some crazy reason, it seems like I have to stream it through some type of screen sharing. If you, unless we go to like Google Hangouts or WebEx or something like that, some of them may have it, but so for now, I guess it's still there. You'll get the best quality by actually opening up the shared link, and that's always kind of a good thing. And so now I'll go ahead and post this in Discord if you want it. So you can open that up. It'll look better than this version. You can just kind of listen in. But we'll say present. So here we are, game architecture. Animation skinning and forward kinematics. Anybody have any questions? Oh wait, did I hit return? Maybe I didn't. I feel like I'm running air traffic control here. This quick I'll let you all sort of vote on sound okay, streaming quality, whatnot. Leave that up there. So all right, good. Some reason I lost my Google slide. Normally I have, or in the other class at least, I had a wonderful little control panel that now is refusing. I don't know where it went. Well, we'll just go. No, I want my notes. Damn it, I want my notes. Try that again. Oh, Google, why you like that? Why you do that to me? 1 second. Technical difficulties. This can't be the worst thing you've experienced all morning. I'm also doing IT for a couple of other struggling organizations, we'll just say. Present, presenter view. Ah, there we go. Duh. Okay, here we go. Full screen, much better. Okay, so the next unit, we are looking at skinning and forward kinematics. If you have had much experience with animation so far in a lot of your games, I know we all kind of start off with this simple kind of flipbook animation where we have hand-drawn or pixelated or pixel-drawn artwork, and we have multiple images, and we just kind of flip book through to get, say, a walk cycle. So we have our little hero here who's flipping through these 6 different poses, and we get a wonderful animation. More and more, though, outside of games that are 2D games, we want to deal with 3D animation. Obviously, a bit trickier than that. So, for example, here we have the goon, and the goon here is a face morphing animation dealing with blend shapes, right? So we're blending between shapes or morphing targets. And if you worked out the math and you said, okay, what I want to do is I have, say, maybe a 30-frame animation with 30,000 vertices, perhaps. And for each of those vertices, that now you're familiar with these things, 12 bytes of position data per vertex. You do that per frame, you're going to wind up about 10 megabytes per frame, which is very scale unfriendly. So if you want to do a simple 30-frame animation, now we're talking about, you're getting up into hundreds of megabytes potentially of data. So we want to avoid that. Where did my... let's see. My OBS, sorry, just in case anyone, there we go. Just in case anyone is commenting through Twitch, I wanted to pull that up, but it looks like nobody is. All right. All right. I'm going to just pay attention to Discord with regards to comments. I can't imagine you probably wouldn't have too many comments today. So we're going to just step through this. Lots of concepts, and talk a little bit about the next homework and kind of where it's at and kind of, where it's going to be. So, skinned animation. Can send the Twitch link. Absolutely. It is... That's it. Eraser mice. There we go. Usually you can find me. There's not too many eraser mices out there on the internet. Okay. So, skinned animation, also known as skeletal subsurface deformation. Okay. A skeleton, we have a skeleton, and not the scary kind. The skeleton consisting of joints is moved in order to drive deformations of a model's vertices or skin. Okay, so the animation happens at the skeletal level, and then hopefully the skin, we have algorithms for moving the skin according to how the skeleton moves, right? So typically you're not thinking, like how now in the real world, how what a person looks like when they're moving obviously isn't just about their skeleton moving. Their skin actually does. Their muscles flex, their tendons move, all that kind of wonderful stuff. But that's a complicated simulation. So instead, I guess you could. Well, let's see. The idea is basically, focus on the higher level motion of the skeleton and then have an algorithm that will help us move and deform the skin around it so that we wind up with a nice animation, a nice manageable animation. So here's for example, we have a skeleton on the left, and then we have a skinned version of that. We have the character that you can see on there that is on the right, and how the movements are mapped between one and the other. So skeletons. What are skeletons? A skeleton is a posable framework of joints arranged in a tree structure. Skeletons uses an invisible armature. Armature is an animation term. If you've ever seen, claymation or Gumby animation, any of that sort of stuff, typically it's not really clay, or sometimes it is, but often it is actually a latex rubber skin around a stuffed padded armature, which is a sometimes wire, sometimes, and in this case of wire, it's not going to really be like a skeleton, but a lot of the time it's basically a ball joint kind of contraption that allows you to move and animate the skeleton. So it's kind of a bit old school even in certain ways. So the skeleton is used as an invisible armature to manipulate the skin and other geometric data of the character. You have joints. Joint allows relative motion within the skeleton. In the end, they're just a coordinate space, so they are a 4x4 matrix transformation. But joints can be rotational, translational, and some non-realistic types as well. Okay, get back to that in a little bit. If you have, let's see, I'm not sure about the older versions. Some of you took Intro to Game Development way in the past, But if you had, looked in Unity and things in terms of different joints and hinges and so on, you've kind of experienced a simplified version of those at least, hopefully. So a bone is really just a synonym for a joint for the most part. So they largely, bones and joints are similarly that you can kind of, well, for example, one might refer to the shoulder joint or upper arm bone and mean the same thing, right? Because it's sort of like, you have an edge and you have the vertices that connect the edges. So ultimately, if you knew all the vertexes, you could be able to sort of derive the edges. Much as you technically, if you had all the edges, you could sort of derive vertices. So you get it, right? Now, in terms of being more explicit, though, this is typical of what we see in content creation tools where we have a parent joint, a bone, and a child joint, right? So usually there'll be overlapping joints, parents and child, depending on how they're ultimately going to move the bone, and that relationship is so that basically movement can be facilitated. So typically you have a joint hierarchy. You have the hips, and hips have spine, but hips also have left up leg and right upper leg, and then on and on all the way through that. So the spine connects to the neck and the head, the spine connects to the left arm, which then goes to the forearm, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Okay, the hierarchy. So in our engine, we do have a joint structure. We know about the name. They are named. They have parents, and then ultimately, the GA joint, we also have things like how the joints are skinned. Right. So look, put a mental footnote here in terms of what you're going to look for in the next homework in terms of manipulating things, where you're going to get your information from. Now, forward kinematics, next thing. So once you have a skeleton, you have a set of joints, you're going to use forward kinematics to basically move the skeleton. So in the recursive tree traversal, each joint first computes its local matrix L, often constrained by its degree of freedom. So what we're doing is we're figuring out the position of a certain joint, and then from there, figuring out, okay, where does, if you've ever done anything with robotics, a lot of the time you say, okay, position the end effector. Imagine, you want to put the hand of the robot, the hand of the animation somewhere. And in order to do that, you're going to have to figure out, you're going to have to go back and from all the different joints kind of work out where that position is going to be. Right. So we're going to be dealing with tree traversal. Each joint first computes its local matrix, constrained by its degrees of freedom, how it can actually move. Then the world matrix W is computed for each joint by concatenating the local matrix with the world matrix of its parent joint. This is sort of similar to the hierarchy of how we translate objects, right? If an object, earlier on we were like, the notion of having a scene, and then within the scene everybody has to be transformed the same because they're all children of, the scene sort of thing, where the camera moves and so on. Now, degrees of freedom. Limitations. The idea behind that, it's nice to be able to limit a degree of freedom to some range, so that, for example, the elbow should be limited from 0 to 150 degrees, so that during your automatic simulation you come up with an algorithm that says, okay, as the arm moves, you can't bend the elbow backwards, that sort of thing. So even though you grab a character by the hand and you pull it, its elbow is not going to go outside of the normal range of motion. So degree of freedom limits is also establishing this range of motion, right? Usually in a realistic character, all degrees of freedom will be limited except for the ones controlling the root. So, right, the root is going to be the position in the world, so you can always kind of flip it around upside down, backwards, so on and so forth, but everything else usually has some sort of limitation, right? Nobody can spin their hips around infinitely, or spin their head around it, and so on. Poses. Once the skeleton is set up, one can then adjust each of the degrees of freedom to specify the pose of the skeleton. You're not so much really adjusting the degrees of freedom, but you're adjusting the joint rotations subject to the degrees of freedom to specify the pose. So define a pose more a vector of joint transformations that map to a set of degrees of freedom in the skeleton, right? So each joint is potentially going to have a transformation for the pose, right? Imagine you take a model and you want to like move it around, and this would be, I have a, if you've ever seen, I should put my camera on, I have an artist's model on my, sitting on my desk about, I guess it's social distancing, it's about 7 feet away from me, that I use for pose, like it poses, and then I can draw it. And all right, we'll have to. Anyway, so pose is a convenient unit that can be manipulated by a higher level animation system and then handed down to the skeleton. Right? You create a pose and say, okay, here's the idle pose. Here is the ready pose. Here is the lunging. Like you create a pose, and then ultimately the system hopefully can sort of interpolate in between based on all the range of motion rules, degree of freedom rules, and so on. So usually each joint will have around 1 to 6 degrees of freedom, but an entire character might have 100 of them. So yeah, they can be certainly complex. There are various types of joints. Again, if you took Intro to Game Programming with me, or I think in most recent years, you've probably seen a bunch of these, in regards to Unity, at least in 2D. Hinges, which 1 degree of freedom, basically they're single rotation. Universal, 2 degrees of rotation. The 2 degrees of freedom. Ball and socket, full on 3 degrees, with Euler angles and quaternions, or ways of different controlling it. There are unusual ones, typical kind of sliding or translational translational joints. Then you can have compound joints that have things like screw joints and so on, so they're going to like rotate and move according to how much they have rotated, so on. And other ones, non-rigid, scale, shear, all these things become joints, right? They are basically establishing relationships in between 2 potential bones. So, quick skinning. So the trick to finding the skinning matrix is, the matrix for a given joint is that you have to realize that the position of the vertex bound to a joint is constant, right? So the position is potentially constant when expressed in that joint's coordinate space, right? The joint in relation to itself is not going to move. So what we have to deal with is this blending, this weighted blending and averaging of their positions, and also potentially in skinning their original position. We're going to be moving the original skin position according to a pose of the skeleton, or potentially blending and averaging in between multiple poses, and finding new locations based on the blending and averaging between them. So in some cases, it's not going to be too bad. Rigid binding, such as robots and mechanical creatures where their skin doesn't bend, the joints are mechanical. You can usually render them with rigid parts and you don't require a smooth skin, so that's good, right? That's easier, right? You're just really, you don't have to interpolate lots of values. You may, just be calculating a new position, but the skin itself is just being, you have an object that's being drawn at a new position. So you render rigid parts, each part is just transformed by its joint matrix independently, and in that situation, every vertex of the character's geometry is transformed by exactly 1 matrix in the end. So that version isn't so bad. Now in the case of smooth skinning, a little bit more complicated. You need an algorithm. So with the smooth skinning algorithm, a vertex can be attached. Now here's where it gets tricky. So you have to think of vertices, or each vertex can be attached to more than 1 joint with adjustable weight that control how much each joint affects it, right? Unlike a rigid one where, okay, as that particular bone rotates, translates, and so on, everything, maintains its normal, just has to move according to that 1 bone and the joints around it. In this case, any vertex can have a weight that contributes to that vertice's position on multiple bones, right? So as the forearm and the upper arm move, certain joints, especially around the elbow, will start to be weighted across the two, and that's going to establish their position, right? Now, thankfully, vertices rarely need to be attached to more than 4 joints. If you're dealing with really, really tiny bones, then perhaps you could think up some weird situations where that would go beyond that. But think about how much the movement of even one of your knuckles, it's rare that sort of motion will translate its way up. The tip of your finger as it moves isn't really affecting the back of your hand or your wrist and so on. How your skin on your forearm is deforming, right? So there's a certain amount of limitation you can do it. So you can get away with a lot more than it sounds like, perhaps. So each vertex is transformed a few times, and then the results are blended, right? So you calculate a new position for the vertex as if it was moving according to that bone, to that joint, and then blend it. So there are lots of names for this algorithm. Blended skin, skeletal subspace deformation, SSD, that's one I think I've referred to most. Multi-matrix skin, matrix palette skinning. I think SSD is usually one of the most common ones you hear. So here's some math for you to refer to. It's similar. Sorry, I'm rolling around in my chair and crossing my legs and making weird sounds with my feet. Sorry. All right, so like I said, the new position, the deformed vertex position, is a weighted average, right? According to the number of bones that it is attached to, right? The sum. Sum and average, sum of the weights, where ultimately all the weights add up to 1. Take a breath. How are we doing? How's that so far? A few people dropped off. Hopefully they'll be watching it later. And let's see. Okay. So the binding matrices with rigid parts or simple skin that can be defined local to the joints that transform it. Let's see. Now let's stop for a moment. Even my notes are going to be fully available online. So I guess some of the stuff, try to think how this is feeling a lot less interactive than the intro to game programming class was. Does it? Well, I guess we'll sort of hit more on the highlight level, and then you can read through things. Yeah. I don't have a good step through example to kind of see this in action. So this feels, like I said, it's feeling far less interactive than the other class. So, but ultimately, let's just say, okay, here's one of the buzzwords you're going to be looking for: the binding matrices. As we get into the engine, looking for where that's happening. So the matrix, it's called a binding matrix for each joint. You have a matrix for each joint, transformed from the joint's local space to skin local space. So the inverse of this matrix represents the opposite transformation from the local space, skin's local space, to the joint's local space. So combining the transformation, it first is a transformation of the vertex from the skin local to joint local, and then from joint local to the world space. It's very similar to, ultimately what we talked about in, really just figuring out your transformations, your translations, and so on. We're really just, applying that, but in a much more elaborate way, because we have to deal with, this blending and averaging across them. So, but that's we have the blending matrix for each joint, right? So let's see, for example, imagine we have a camera in the world. So the camera has a camera to world translation. We have a model. Normally there's a model to world transformation. To get the model in screen coordinates, you've seen it, we want to be able to see the model from the camera's point of view. So that means we want this means we want the world to be in the camera space, the world to camera transformation, inverse of that, the camera to world. And that gives you the view matrix. This should be familiar. And okay, similarly, we do the same thing with regards to the joints and their vertices, right? Transform a vertex, you want to be able to see that vertex from the joint's point of view, right? So imagine that the joint is like the camera, the vertex is like the model. So the joint is figuring out where, ultimately, how you're going to, or the vertex is going to be rendered according to the joint, right? Just like the model is rendered according to the camera, right? Similar. All right. Now, of course, we ultimately do want to render it as well. So you're also going to wind up transforming the normals to world space as well. So the skin is going to need to be rendered, right? The normal is a direction vector. We don't want to get it just by translating it. So we need, let's see, because the normal is a direction vector, we don't want it to get the translation from the matrix. So we only need to multiply the normal by the upper 3x3 portion of the matrix. Right, so it's limited. We'll have to, I'll leave that to for you to look at that in the engine. Okay. So now for the smooth skin, you have to blend the normal just as you did with the positions. And then after you do the blend, here's the important part. After that, the normal must be then renormalized, right? Because you're going to be potentially doing all sorts of wonderful munging of it as you're creating that averaging. There's nothing ensuring that it's going to be a normalized normal vector as a result. So that's why we have to renormalize it after we've done that. So the smooth skin algorithm, the SSD, is pretty simple, quite fast. Its quality is limited. There's some really, really great animations out there on the web. If you've ever seen that really bizarre, bendy, flexy guy, first one who can post this to the Discord channel would be great. It was famous a couple of years ago where there's this kind of like rendered, really weird, fleshy, almost ragdoll kind of thing that was sort of walking down streets and dancing, and it was just being totally distorted in all kinds of ways. And that's largely because of these issues, these kind of simple SSD kind of issues, that joints tend to collapse as they bend more, or as they bend to kind of extreme positions or kind of unanticipated ways. So you get these kind of squished joints. It's very difficult to get specific control of smooth skin. And when you're painting things, now the tools have become a lot better in terms of weight painting. Maybe we should, a good thing to look at, and normally this was, if you do a search on weight painting skinning, I think that'll show up some good stuff. I'll have to post that on the channel later to show you kind of like how some of the tools have evolved to make this less of a pain than it used to be, because it can certainly, if you had to do it by hand, it's quite unintuitive and difficult to edit. But it certainly is a good baseline. All right. So here's the bendy, weird limitation, right? This pinching and stretching and squashing, and even, as things rotate. Imagine if everything was a balloon. So if you're doing balloon animals, but it's worse than balloon animals. It's balloon animals that are like sort of filled with sand. And they, like in the case of this elbow here, where it starts to pinch and fold in on itself here, right? Because of these, it trying to make up the space there. It's not really smart about how ultimately that pinch, right? You don't have these sort of in-betweens that it should deal with. Or here, where the rotation has caused this elbow to kind of collapse on itself as well, right? So those are the limitations. Homework 5 is going to be the bendy bar. So it's going to be basically what we just showed here. We're going to do a little version of that. Nothing too elaborate. We're not going to, deal with a whole skinned biped or anything by that means. We're gonna simulate. We're going to look at an implementation of this basic SSD skinning and see if we can get the bendy bar to kind of at least work in a reasonable way. And that's where we're going to be. So let's see. That is it for this particular lecture. let's see. Let me look through the homework and see. The one weird thing is sometimes when I post it, some versions, I think, to remember if the bendy bar one then exposes all the physics stuff that you may not have finished yet. As soon as I feel confident in that, or that everybody has kind of wrapped up what they're doing with the, or whatever, I could do a selective. Oh, that should do that. As soon as you finish or declare yourself having finished the last homework, I will. So I'm not just going to send a link out to everybody for the next homework. Maybe, maybe not. Let me look through it within the next day. Start sending out. So if you want to say, okay, I'm done with homework 5, check it as is today, or the last, no, I'm not going to do any more check-ins. How does that sound? Does that sound like a reasonable way to sort of make it self-paced? I'll let you do a reasonable quote on that there. So yeah, let me know. Shoot me a direct message saying, yeah, I'm done. And then as soon as you are, within the next 24 to 36 hours, I will do my best to get you a link that says, okay, here's the next homework. Right? So I'm just going to sort of like roll things out on a one-by-one basis. There aren't so many of you that it's going to be a problem. Okay, so on that note, read through this, do some Google searching. If you have the textbook, that's I forget where I have to review in the textbook how much the skinning stuff is in there. And I'll try to find some other extra outside the normal stuff materials like I have done for the other posts as well. And contact me if you're still having any issues, and we can continue to have a lot of the conversations in just the regular Discord channels. Thanks again for helping out one another, and we'll make the best of a terrible situation. Any last questions before I sign off for today? Wow, it just made the screen. I can't see any of the text now. Text channels, general. Oh, that was neat. I didn't realize I could do that. I just like full screen, because normally it says stop streaming. Your stream is still running. Interesting. All right, on that note, be well, stay safe, stay sane. Check out, different stuff that's going on. Anything. I'm trying to keep my own sanity. When are we deciding about submitting? And submitting. Okay. Final project proposals. If you are already thinking about any particular ones, go ahead, and it's never too early. If you have a proposal, I'll talk more as I wrap my brain around it, around what I would like to see in the final projects. But again, in a lot of cases, we'll play it by ear. But feel free to reach out to me directly if you have something in mind that you want to work on in the engine, adding audio or adding some type of advanced networking thing, or some other type of skinning mode, or you want one of the lighting shaders or something like that. Let me know. We'll take it from there. We will have some time. I don't know how we'll do with. We're supposed to have a pitch sort of thing for the whole class to see. I'll have to give that some thought as well. So we'll do phase 1 of that decision next time we meet, and we'll chat. The term meeting will become much more fluid, of course, as things go on. We can meet and talk about it anytime over Discord, and we'll do it from that. Sound good? All right. That's the deal. Have a great rest of your day. I got to go have some lunch and something to drink before I totally dry out. All right. If you do hear from anyone else in the class who you didn't see on today's chat, hear them for any reason, I'm sure you're probably not going to run into them in person, but I know we're not quite all been here yet. A couple of people offline.
but do, let them know and that they can check out the Twitch and so on. All right, take care. See you guys next time and continuously. All right. I gotta hang up here. Disconnect. Stop streaming.